Magic player. Ricky, more of a Bay Area player.
And we're actually gonna see both variants at work here. It looks like. So Ricky does have some black temples. He has 3 Temple of Silence and 3 Temple of Deceit to go with his 4 blue-white temples. So that's 10 temples total. 6 tapped black sources, 1 water grave, and 1 godless shrine. And he does not have any black cards in his main deck. But post-board, he has access to Blood Baron, Notion Thief. Those are both 1-ofs. 4 Doomblade, that'll do nothing here. But we're going into a game 3, so fully expect both of these players to have access to their control mirror suite out of the board.
It looks like David here is taking a mulligan to 5 cards.
Okay. Mulligans, obviously they're bad news. You never want to be mulliganing to 5 in a late round situation like this. But in a control mirror, actually, it is not quite as big a deal.
So you see Ricky here lead off with a temple. David with a Mutavault. Island for Ricky on turn 2. David with an island off the top. He was missing blue mana in his hand previously, so this is a big draw.
And not passing the turn yet. Looks like he is considering. He has Pithing Needles in his board. He may have brought one in. He may be considering playing one, but no.
I think he was contemplating going beatdowns with that Mutavault, but then felt better of it. Thought better of it. Ricky with a Temple of Enlightenment on turn 3. Leaves the card on top from the scry.
David kind of, now that you mentioned it, that Mutavault, most likely what he was considering, and kind of telegraphs those counterspells by choosing not to attack. Although Ricky has to wonder, telegraph the counterspell or actually bluffing the counterspell.
End of turn quicken here from David after Ricky adds a Mutavault to his side of the board and passes. And now David's starting to pick up some land drops here and recover a little bit from this mulligan to 5.
Yeah, cycled that quicken just to find some lands, did find them, so David not under any serious pressure. He's got at least 1 more land drop. He doesn't need to tap out for anything to stabilize, and he's just going to sit on those syncopates for a while.
So he plays a Hallowed Fountain untapped, passes the turn to Ricky, who cycles Azorius Charm at the end of David's turn. Ricky then plays Temple of Enlightenment, scries to the bottom.
And yeah, so Ricky, we said, had 10 temples. David has access to, it looks like 7. Those temples are huge in these control mirrors. Control mirrors really about making your land drops. The temples help you make your land drops early, and when you get to the very late game, they basically dig you to action.
So David, the first player to miss a land drop on turn number 6. Ricky just playing lands and saying go so far, and David going for the first real spell of the game, a Sphinx's Revelation 4/2 at the end of Ricky's turn.
And Ricky, I believe, has access to a Gainsay, but this is a baby rev. This is just 2 cards. He's going to rev in response. Okay.
Yeah, bigger rev from Ricky here, the one making the land drops. He's going to rev for 4 in response.
Sure. Yeah. Resolving draw 4 is pretty substantial here. He does open himself up to David, allowing David to resolve something big. He could resolve Elspeth. That's probably the card that is most on Ricky's radar. Ricky must have decided that he doesn't mind if David sticks Elspeth here.
So Ricky has to discard down to hand size, gets rid of 2 lands. David untaps and draws.
Yeah.
Has not found a 6th land even after revving, but he does have Jace, Architect of Thought. Taps his 4 mana, plays Jace, quickly minusing.
Yeah, I love this spot because David does not have access to a land, but Ricky doesn't know that. So playing Jace, down-ticking, Ricky has to ask himself, do I need to overvalue the lands? And this is actually, this is the best play for Ricky, even if he does assume that David missed the land drop. You would rather give him access to only 1.
So David now looking at a Plains and an Essence Scatter versus an Island on this Jace flip.
David would much rather have the blue source here, but a free spell is nothing to sneeze at. Essence Scatter, kind of a weird one post-board. We don't know exactly how many creatures Ricky's going to present to fight over. We know he has 1 Aetherling in the main, and it looks like just the 1 Notion Thief and the 1 Blood Baron. So only 3 creatures in Ricky's entire 75. That Essence Scatter, unlikely to do a ton of work. Although Ricky needs to win somehow, and he will present a target for it given enough time.
Well, David ends up just discarding the Essence Scatter to hand size there. Ricky untaps, draws, plays an Island, and now let's see what he can resolve now.
You see an Elspeth in hand, and I believe a Blood Baron.
So Ricky gonna turn on a Mutavault, attack Jace. David fires up his own Mutavault to block. They trade lands. And now Elspeth comes down for Ricky.
Yeah. Elspeth is going to demand an answer. It continues producing tokens. Those tokens, they will not be able to get in for damage as long as David keeps his Jace in play. But given enough turns, and in this case it actually would only be 3 turns, Ricky can eventually ultimate the Elspeth and win in one swing.
So David's going to answer the Elspeth with a detention sphere.
Yeah, David not going to give him time to do that.
Gets rid of Elspeth.
Actually, looks like David has plenty of detention spheres to spare there. So he could actually answer the tokens as well, should he decide next turn that he needs to tick down in search of more land.
So he takes Jace up to 3 and passes the turn back. Howl Fountain untapped for Ricky. Something big to do this turn, potentially. And it's a revoke existence on the detention sphere.
That is a 2 of out of Ricky's board.
This is met with a dissolve from David, which is met by gainsay by Ricky.
So Ricky's going to get that Elspeth back into play, continue to tick up, make tokens. David has access to another detention sphere in hand, but those 6 tokens are going to be spooky as long as they sit in play. Basically, as long as they're in play, David has to, he has to keep them in mind as he resolves his Jace each turn.
So David untaps, minus his Jace quickly, takes 2 lands over to detention sphere.
Yeah, Ricky sees the detention sphere, has to put it by itself, doesn't know that David has access to one already, although David would not mind 2 detention spheres here.
So here's a detention sphere from David. Targets Elspeth. Ricky says, okay.
And so David having ticked down Jace, that Jace is unprotected currently. Yeah. And I think we have to suspect that Ricky is going to devote several of those attackers to getting it off the board. David does have another Jace in hand, so David may be looking at this as just kind of a time walk for saving some damage here.
So Ricky's going to split 3 and 3, 3 at the Elspeth tokens at Jace, 3 at David, finishing off Jace. David falls 215, and now follow-up play of Jace from Ricky.
So you see dueling Jaces here. Ricky has a Blood Baron, which that would be the threat that he could stick to really threaten to take over the game. David has access to an Aetherling, actually. So if David feels like his back's against the wall here and he does find the land to leave up 1 blue mana, I kind of expect David to just slam Aetherling and pray here.
So Ricky quickly minuses the Jace, looks at Supreme Verdict split against 2 lands, a Temple of Silence and a Hallowed Fountain.
Right. Revelation at this point, going to be for a lot of cards. But Ricky actually considers for a good while about taking just the 2 lands. He does need that extra. He doesn't have a land, so we would need it to make the land drop. Land drops, again, the barometer of success in a control mirror.
So Ricky takes the Revelation here, leaving Jace potentially exposed against David's Mutavault. David untaps, plays a Hallowed Fountain, untap, falls to 13. And it looks like David's going to fire up that Mutavault and try to take care of Jace.
Okay.
And Ricky says that's okay.
Ricky gets to use Jace as a divination. Well, as a sort of divination. Actually only got 1 card, but it was a good one.
Now, David with 6 mana left over on his turn, uses 4 of it to cast Jace. That resolves.
He's likely going to tick it up here. But he's thinking about it.
And he's gonna plus Jace and pass the turn back.
Okay, sitting on 2 syncopates, which he could only cast for 1. I believe there was also a negate in there. 3 syncopates.
Ricky draws a syncopate of his own. And now you can you really can't tell that 1-player mulligan to 5 here as the game has progressed to this stage.
In a sense, you can't. Are they matched on land at this point? I see Ricky has 8. Yeah, they both have 8. Those syncopates are kind of rotting in David's hand. So he ends up, although it looks like he is going to use 1 here just to tap down Okay, so there, yeah, the Syncopate is actually doing a pretty good mana short impression here.
So Ricky goes for Elspeth here with 2 mana up. David syncopates for 1. Ricky pays, but now the shields are down, and David's going to get an opportunity to stick in Aetherling here.
And that is going to be huge. Aetherling, once it's down, can really only be time walked. It can't actually be answered. In these sort of matchups, you will sometimes see Pithing Needle as a way to sort of solve a resolved Aetherling. Ricky does not have access to that card. So Ricky actually does not have a solution long-term to Aetherling. He can race it, and that is likely what we're going to see him attempt to do.
So Aetherling resolves. Jace takes up to 6, shutting down Ricky's army of soldier tokens. Turn goes back to Ricky. Looks like he's going to start off the action this turn with the Divination.
He's going to dig for presumably an answer to that Jace, actually. If he can get the Jace out of play, then his army of 1/1s actually will win this race.
Elspeth takes up again, making 3 more soldiers, and Ricky simply passes the turn back with a lot of mana at the ready.
Yeah, had the option of casting Blood Baron there. Blood Baron doesn't do a ton against Aetherling. Of course, Aetherling has virtual vigilance, so he's just going to sit on some counters.
So David now suddenly out in front a little bit here, plays a Temple of Enlightenment. Got a lot of counter spells to dispel and 2 syncopates in his hand alongside the Attention Sphere. Sends an Aetherling at Elspeth, makes Aetherling unblockable.
That's actually, it's not completely clear that that he should do that. He has Ricky on a 3-turn clock that he knows about. Of course, Ricky has a Sphinx's Revelation, so he could make it a 4-turn clock. And he does have an answer currently for the tokens.
So Aetherling successfully takes down Elspeth. Again, Jace takes up to 7, threatening to go ultimate in 2 turns.
Looks like Ricky is going to...
Contemplating a move here. It looks like he has a Notion Thief in his hand he could deploy at the end of the turn, and he does.
Just going to get it in there to deal some damage. And that was at end step. David actually has not blinked his Aetherling yet, so if he were to do that, it actually would not return until Ricky's end step. So David without a blocker right now.
So it resolves. Notion Thief is in play, shutting down Sphinx's Revelation and giving Ricky an attacker that can actually make some progress against Jace. So Notion Thief at Jace, knocking Jace down to 5, and
just passes right back.
Ricky sends the turn back.
Yeah, now that Ricky has lost that Elspeth, he has to find an answer to Jace to make some headway here. David's still sitting on a ton of syncopates. Elspeth is going to eat up some of his mana each turn, so those syncopates, it's going to be tough to actually get too much value out of them unless it is kind of on the mana short front as we saw before.
So David going for a Notion Thief here. That's going to be met with a dissolve from Ricky. David looking at a dispel here, deciding whether or not he wants to fight over it.
That detention sphere, do we know that it was targeting? Yeah, I suspect that he was actually targeting the tokens there.
So David decides not to fight any further over this, takes Jace up to 6, sends Aetherling in, makes Aetherling unblockable, and waiting to see if there's any pumps. No pumps, sends Ricky down to 18.
Yeah, still a 3-turn clock. Ricky is going to have the option to rev for 3 before untapping. He does not have a land in hand, but actually it looks like David is going to have some further plays.
Seeing momentarily here.
No, he's going to reconsider.
And just sends the turn back.
Ricky chooses not to use Sphinx's Revelation.
What do you think Ricky is trying to set up right now?
Ricky, that's a good question. I think maybe he, first things first, he wants to resolve that Revelation for a significant amount. I think he knew that he could not do that turn. I would guess that we're going to see him go for a rev for, would it just be 3? It would be for 4 now with Gainsay backup.
So Aetherling across, made unblockable, pumped twice. That's 6 points of damage. Ricky falls from 18 to 12.
So once that is assuming he can force through that rev, or at least eat some of David's counter spells trying to fight over it. What he needs to have happen here is he first off has to deal with that Jace. So he's looking for primarily Detention Sphere. He does not have access to any other answer, actually, so he needs to find Detention Sphere here.
So here's the baby rev that you refer to. It's a rev for 3 with 3 mana up. David, contemplating a response, a handful of counters. He goes with Dispel.
Okay.
Ricky dispels back.
So Ricky has Dispel and Gainsay to defend this. So it looks like he's going to win this fight. David is considering whether he actually wants to keep fighting further. He could use, all he has access to here is Syncopate, so he actually cannot fight further. Ricky's going to draw 3 cards. He needed to find, again, an answer to Jace. Once he answers Jace, he's got a giant pile of tokens in play. Those can actually win the race against Aetherling, it looks like.
So you're going to see Ricky, after resolving this rev for 3, a lot of action in hand.
Okay.
Starts off with a Detention Sphere.
David, again, has those Syncopates. Mana the bottleneck here. Those aren't going to help him out here. He might be able to deny Ricky some mana.
And this Detention Sphere definitely worth fighting over from David's side. He's going to, looks like, attempt to dissolve this momentarily.
Oh, he did have access to dissolve as well. Yeah, you've got to fight this.
He says, nope, he's not going to fight it. Lets it resolve.
Okay. Now, the Jace trigger is still going to be there this turn. So he does have at least 1 turn before he starts taking the beats. He can swing for 8 total with Aetherling. Ricky can then crack back for 9, it looks like. So on the board, it actually looks like David's still winning this race. We see Ricky with an Elixir of Mortality. That 5 life is going to do it. Ricky actually has a number of ways to re-swing the race in his favor.
So David now basically having to ride Aetherling all the way to victory. Makes Aetherling unblockable. We'll see how many pumps here. 1 from the Mutavault.
Gonna go.
So Aetherling up to 5 currently.
In order to make it a 2-turn clock, he has to pump it to at least a 7-2 this turn.
1 more pump. 1 more pump.
He's gonna go full out. Go for the 8-1.
Ricky says, okay, nothing I can do. I go down to 7.
Yeah, now Aetherling, mana intensive when it's working here. David has tapped down to just 5 lands untapped. So those Syncopates, still not so effective. He has 1 dissolve up and then a Syncopate for 1 as means to protect himself from that full grip of Ricky's.
David, I mean, his mana right now is so complicated.
And just packs it up.
It just looks like a concession here. David, it looks like going over the math here, trying to figure out there's some way that he could have re-navigated the race, but...
Yeah, I would guess that Ricky simply said, hey man, I have this elixir, and then that was good enough. David was actually winning the race on board, of course, with a full hand from Ricky. He had to suspect that was not going to be good enough, and in fact, it was not.
So we're seeing momentarily here, that felt like a very fast concession, so I'm not sure if there was an issue with life totals here momentarily, but it does look like on the surface, Ricky Sidher wins that match 2-1, and it goes up on the scoreboard as such, moving to 7-1. David Stednitz, like I said, local player that I'm very familiar with. He moves to 6-2 out of top 8 contention.
Sure. Yeah, and Ricky going to move up to 7-1. There's actually been quite a lot of Esper. When I say Esper, I mean all of the areas on the spectrum from blue-white to full-blown Esper. But we're seeing a lot of that at the top tables.